Welcome to the Gray Path Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tony B. Today, we are going to finish up our unofficial trilogy of episodes focusing on mental health and how mental health kind of affects our lives as a whole. Now, again, this wasn't planned as a trilogy, but they do kind of all intertwine. The first episode was on Jessica Jones, which is a Netflix series and a Marvel character, and focusing on how to escape a manipulative relationship. Episode 2, if you will, of this part, or the second part of this, was last week's episode focusing on Bucky Barnes, also known as the Winter Soldier, and the concept of victim blaming. And this episode today, we are going to talk about WandaVision, which is a show on Disney Plus centered in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it stars Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff, also known by the end of the series officially as the Scarlet Witch. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to explore WandaVision and discuss this concept of how traumas from our past shape our reality. And we're going to talk about why that's a good thing, a bad thing, some things to be aware of. It probably isn't going to be a very long episode, but I do feel that it is an important subject matter that should be discussed. So without further ado, jumping in, Wanda Maximoff, also known as the Scarlet Witch, is a character played by Elizabeth Olsen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She made her first official entry in Avengers Age of Ultron. And they explain through that movie and multiple others, as well as the show, that she was born in a fictional country of Sokovia, and she was born with a twin brother who was named Petro, also known as Quicksilver. Now, in the MCU, because of I'm not sure if it was copyrights or what it was, but because of licensing rights, they were not allowed to call Wanda or Petro, aka Quicksilver, they were not allowed to call them mutants. In the comics, Wanda and Petro are both mutants. They are actually children of Magneto. Now that now that Disney has purchased the Fox properties, the X-Men and the concept of mutants are coming back into the MCU, so they may end up tying in Magneto as their father. It's hard to say, but for all intents and purposes today, we're just going to say that they explain that Wanda is born with the ability to manipulate chaos magic. Now, we don't know about that. When they first introduced her in Age of Ultron, we're made to believe that her and her brother gained their powers through interactions with the Mind Stone and experiments done by Hydra. We find out a little bit later, it was actually they volunteered for these experiments with Hydra because of anti-American sentiment that stemmed from a U.S.-led bombing in Sokovia, which killed their parents. Now, during the events of Age of Ultron, at the end of the movie, Wanda loses her twin brother due to, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You know, Quicksilver is incredibly fast, faster than speeding bullets, yet somehow he gets shot to shit, saving, I want to say it was Sam. Yeah, saving the Falcon, I believe. Sorry, it's been a while since I've seen that movie. But he gets shot up by a helicopter and he dies. So that's, she's lost her parents. She loses Petro then. So after that movie, you see there are the events of Captain America Civil War. During that movie, she ends up siding with Cap. At the end of it, she's captured and she's imprisoned at the raft for a short period of time before Cap rescues her. After reconciliation is done and the whole deal with Thanos comes about, her and Vision are on the run. They've actually, at this point in time, they end up falling in love and they're living in Europe. Well, Thanos is after the Mind Stone, which, if you did not know, the Mind Stone is embedded in Vision. So to get to the Mind Stone, he has to get to Vision. As such, at the end of Infinity War, Vision dies. Thanos gets him, rips the stone out of his head, killing him, and then completes the gauntlet. And then Scarlet Witch herself is killed during the snap. Now, she comes back, as everyone does whenever the Hulk comes, and Tony Stark recreates a similar gauntlet. Hulk's the only one who can survive using it. He undoes the snap, brings everybody back. At the end of all of that, we find out, which is the beginning of WandaVision, the show, we find out that after they defeat Thanos, she discovers that the US military has Vision's body. And she's so distraught because not only did she lose Vision and her parents and Petro, But Vision can't come back because Vision didn't die in the snap. Vision was killed when the Mind Stone was tore out. So, distraught and overwhelmed by grief and loss, she breaks into this, you know, military installation, if you will. She steals Vision's body, and then, in an unintended just explosion of her own power, she creates this new reality, this pocket dimension, if you will, encompassing this town of Westview. Now, when she creates this pocket dimension, she recreates a version of Vision, like because she gets into the, excuse me, she gets into the U.S. installation. She sees that Vision's dead. She loses it. So she creates a version of Vision using her chaos magic. She also, unbeknownst to herself, enthralls all of the town's original inhabitants and turns them basically into mindless thralls that are cast members, if you will. And we say cast members because this reality is basically shaped by, you see throughout the show, she had an affinity for old sitcoms, Dick Van Dyke, oh god, I can't remember some of the other ones that are on there. It's pretty cool. The series goes through, and each episode's like a new decade, and it kind of focuses on the way the sitcoms were during that decade. And she really kind of creates this idyllic world for herself where Vision's happy. She creates two kids. You know, they had twins of their own. At one point, it looks like her brother returned. There's a subplot there. It's really not her brother. But anyway, all of this goes on. And at the end of WandaVision, at the end of the series, Wanda comes face to face with difficult, a very difficult realization. She comes to realize that all of these people in this world she created, these people that she's enthralled, they are all terrified and miserable. And she realizes that she is hurting people because she has created this way for her to cope with this terrible loss in her life, not just of Vision, but of everything. But in creating this pocket reality, she is hurting people. And also at the end of WandaVision, she officially unlocks her full power and is now officially known as the Scarlet Witch. They don't call her that in anything else until we get to the end of WandaVision. And realizing what she has to do, she uses her magic to undo this bubble, this pocket reality. And while it does free the cast members and frees, you know, everything that's around, unfortunately, it also erases her version of Vision that she created, her husband, the person she loves, and it also erases her children. And it leaves her ashamed of what she did and just in this terrible depressive sadness. So at the end of WandaVision, she flees. Now, I didn't go into all the details because I didn't want to ruin the show completely for people listening. If you haven't watched it, I highly encourage you to. You can easily binge watch it in a day. That's what I did. And it's very well done. It's very well done. It brings in some new characters into the MCU. If you do watch it, there's another witch in there, Agatha. She's actually getting her own show. I think they just officially announced that she's going to get her own show. I'm not entirely certain what it's going to be about. But Wanda's life is shaped by her traumas. I mean, in the span of her relatively short life, I don't know her exact age during WandaVision, but I can't imagine she's older than maybe late 20s, early 30s at the most. She's lost her parents. She lost her brother. She's been experimented on by Hydra, terrible experiments. She volunteered for them, but still doesn't change terrible experiments that were done to her. You know, in between uh Thanos' arrival and the end of Age of Ultron, you know, she's working with the Avengers at the beginning of Civil War, and there's a character named Crossbones, who is like a Captain America villain, and he tries to kill all the Avengers by basically self-detonating. He basically has a bomb strapped to himself and tries to self-detonate. Scarlet Witch saves the Avengers by twisting him up in this little bubble of chaos magic and throwing him. Unfortunately, when she throws him, he's the one who detonates and blows up the UN building, which kills the king of Wakanda, which causes all kinds of shit, causes basically the whole plot of Civil War. So she's blamed for that. She's locked into the Avengers headquarters, told not to leave. Vision's told not to let her go. She's basically blamed for, I mean, an impossible choice. She had to save the Avengers. If she wouldn't have acted, when she did, crossbones would have detonated. He would have killed Captain America. Chances are he would have killed the Falcon, probably killed Scarlet Witch. Granted, she threw him into the building, but she was thinking. I mean, she was basically a teenager, early 20s, and she just reacted to save people. But she's got hatred towards her because of that. She loses Vision. She falls in love with Vision. Feels like she has a normal life, only to have Vision taken away from her. And not only is he taken away from her, but during the events of Infinity War, she decides to kill Vision herself in order to prevent Thanos from getting the Mind Stone. She blows it up, only to realize since Thanos already had the Time Stone, he just reversed time, put it back together, rips it out of Vision's head, kills Vision, gets the stone anyway. Then he snaps. She gets snapped out of existence. So she snapped out of existence for something like 5 years. Then she comes back, learns that the man she loves, or the android she loves, is irrevocably gone and dead, and there's nothing she can do about it. So she's had a very hard life, a very, very hard life. And these traumas of her, they they literally shaped her reality. Now we're going to talk metaphorically in this episode, but it literally shaped her reality. These traumas, losing her parents in a bombing accident, you find out that her little reality is based on sitcoms because her dad used to bring her sitcoms to watch, American sitcoms, because that's what she loved. Then she loses her parents in a senseless bombing. So again, these traumas that she's been enduring and carrying with her quite literally shape her reality once her chaos magic hits like a peak and she creates this pocket dimension. Now, just like Wanda's reality is quite literally shaped by her traumas, a lot of times, all of us, me, you, all of us, our realities are in a way, if not directly shaped, indirectly shaped by the traumas that we've experienced in our lives. Now, these traumas, I mean, this effect on our reality can be subtle, it can be profound. There's lots of degrees to it, and there's a lot of different traumas that can trigger it. Now, I'm going to talk about three big ones. And these are not by any means a comprehensive list, but this is the three big things that I see are traumas that cause these distortions to how we view the world, interact with the world, et cetera, et cetera. So the first one I want to talk about is betrayals. And those betrayals can be anything from minor betrayals to major betrayals. And it's also important to understand when we talk about betrayal and we talk about minor versus major, that's a very subjective thing to discuss. What might be a minor betrayal for one person could be a very, very major betrayal for another. So it is important when we're discussing this it's not a dick measuring contest. It's a very subjective thing. It's really the betrayal impacts the person betrayed the way it impacts them. And I've seen a lot of times where people will argue and say, well, that betrayal wasn't that bad. Well, the betrayal wasn't to you, it was to me, or it was to the affected individual. Only the affected individual can really quantify how much that betrayal affected them. Now, the problem with betrayals are like a poison. They leave a lasting effect, which does alter our realities. So, one of the first ways in which it does is betrayals tend to lead to trust issues, trouble trusting people. For me, I'm just thinking of one in particular. It was a person I was very close to. I considered this person like I use the term tribe a lot, part of my tribe. Um, and when this person betrayed me, it was a shocker because obviously someone I considered a confidant was not someone I would assume would betray me. So when that person betrayed me, then came the question of, okay, well, perhaps I overshared from the beginning. Obviously, I was a bad judge of character. So now I realize moving forward, now I have trouble trusting people. Now I have trouble opening up, being not necessarily honest, but being forthright by sharing all of these things. I now have trouble doing that because now I'm concerned, what if I run into these same issues? I ran into these issues before. Very good chance I could run into them again. So this particular betrayal, of course, now leads to trouble trusting. I think another way in which betrayals really affect our reality is it really gets you questioning people's motives. It really gets you questioning your own judgment of people. Um, I think to myself, without getting in anything, any sort of details, I think to myself several betrayals that I've encountered in my life where I look back on it and you think to yourself, was the writing on the wall? Could you have anticipated it? Did you do something that caused it? So not only now are you starting to question other people's motives, okay, are people being nice to you because they're trying to gather information, which, of course, also touches upon that trouble trusting people. You start really questioning the motives of other people because now you start to think, well, people in the past, these traumas these betrayals you've experienced in the past, they were done. So now you start attributing these motives from people who betrayed you to people who didn't. I know people that this affects. I have a very close friend who, in a lot of ways, questions the motives of every single person around them because of betrayals and also because of the next thing we're going to talk about, which is abuse. So another trauma that can definitely negatively affect our reality is abuse. Now, abuse, understand, is mental, physical, sexual. There's all kinds of abuse. I'll focus on the big three: mental, physical, and sexual abuse. Um, so I've talked about it before. I was a victim of sexual abuse when I was a kid. It definitely distorted my reality. There's definitely, I mean, I imagine that I probably don't even understand or know or can even anticipate or articulate ways in which that event or series of events, because it was a series, that series of events affects how I view the world now. Obviously, therapists make a living out of unpacking these traumatic experiences, these traumatic abuses, and helping the individuals discover how it affects their life. I think mental abuse. So I think about when I was a younger child, I was bullied mercilessly. I was bullied. I talked about this on, I think, a previous episode or a few previous episodes. I was bullied terribly because of my hygiene, because I was poor. I didn't have any friends. I was pretty much everybody's community punching bag. And that definitely shaped my reality. Now, I guess you could say a positive thing that came out of that is this drive I have because of being everyone's punching bag, being told I was nothing, having no friends, basically being treated like I was a piece of shit. And it was, people doing a charity thing just to have me around. That obviously put a chip on my shoulder, which thankfully I've used that chip to kind of drive my success. But that type of mental abuse is also probably the primary reason that I keep my circle small. It's something I always say: I keep my circle small, meaning I wouldn't even say I have a lot of quote unquote friends. You can call them acquaintances, friends, whatever. I have, I don't know, probably 20 people I would consider acquaintances. I would say, well, I guess maybe more like 40 people I would say are acquaintances. I probably have 20 people I would call friends. And then I probably have 5 to 7 people I would call my close best friends. And I keep my circle small, and I keep my circle small because when I was growing up, I didn't have many friends to begin with. And, to talk about some of the ones before, I had friends before that, when I didn't have anybody, I thought they had my back. I thought they were my friends, only to get betrayed. So again, multiple traumas here kind of affect how I view people, how I view trusting people, how I view letting people get close, just kind of how my reality is shaped when it comes to social interactions. Physical abuse. I was physically abused by my stepfather. After my mother and father divorced, my mother married this piece of shit who one of his favorite pastimes was to beat the ever loving shit out of me, punch me, kick me, throw me into walls, throw me through walls. It was bad. I got beat so bad one time. I lived in Washington State, and I remember pieces of it, but I think who knows how much of that memory is actually my own, because I know I've heard it retold a bunch of times. But long story short, I got beat so bad that apparently I ran away and was fully intending to walk to Pennsylvania from Washington State. Eventually, the state police found me, brought me home. But the physical abuse, was probably the driving force of why I wanted to get into martial arts. I wouldn't say it was directly, like I didn't go into martial arts going, oh, there's this douchebag beat the fuck out of me. No, there was just always this drive in me to want to be able to defend myself and to understand the martial arts. So again, those traumas shaped my reality. A great way that physical abuse, the physical and you could say physical and mental abuse, shaped my reality. I have a really big problem with bullies. When I see people bullying people, I don't stand for it. It invokes a rage inside of me. So again, my reality is twisted and shaped by these traumas that I experienced earlier. Finally, the last of the big three, if you will, that I'll talk about as far as traumas are concerned, are manipulations. And now this ties directly into the last two episodes. So to kind of carry on the reoccurring theme. So starting in the Jessica Jones episode, I talked about this individual I know that we just identified as Jane Doe. Talked about this individual in both of the previous two episodes. Well, I would say, knowing Jane Doe as I do, that individual's reality is incredibly shaped and altered based upon the manipulations that person faced by, and again, in previous episodes, I referred to this individual's mother as Mama Kilgrave, which for further explanation, go back and listen to the Jessica Jones episode. And so I called Kilgrave was a former paramour of this individual. And then this person's mother, I just referred to as Mama Kilgrave. But the manipulations and the machinations of these two people really affected Jane Doe to the point where her reality, in my opinion, her reality is very much shaped by the traumas that she endured at the hands of those two people. Hypervigilance is probably a good word to come to mind. This individual's outlook on the world is one of hypervigilance, constantly questioning the motives of others, questioning actions, thoughts, everything. I don't want to call it paranoia, but I think hypervigilance is probably a good term for it. This person's reality is in fact shaped because of these traumas that they endured earlier in their life, to the point where I would argue it's partially disruptive of this individual's life, because this hypervigilance is I guess I don't experience it, but I have to assume this hypervigilance is incredibly exhausting. So I have been manipulated in the past by multiple people. And it's true, these manipulations, especially when you're caught, you become more aware of it. And depending upon the severity of the manipulation, you then, to go back to some of the stuff we just talked about when we were talking about betrayals, you begin to question people's motives. Because if you were successfully manipulated previously and then you became aware of it, obviously you're now more aware, you're more vigilant, you're more questioning of what people do. So again, your reality is now altered. It is now shaped by these traumas that you have experienced. So, as we discussed with Wanda, at the end of WandaVision, she has this moment where she realizes that the people in Westview are miserable and scared. And she realizes what she's doing to them. In order to maintain her own peace of mind and her own idyllic life, she is killing and torturing. Well, not literally killing, but she is torturing, and she's torturing these poor people that they don't have the means to fight against this immense power of her chaos magic. So she does what she feels she has to do, and she dismisses this reality, which comes at a great personal cost to her. So I want all of you who are listening to this, I want you to think about some of the ways in which your reality, or your perception of your reality, is in fact shaped and built upon traumas that you've received in the past. And then I want you to think about two things. I want you to think about what Wanda did when she realized what was happening, the harm she was causing. And you really need to ask yourself, what path do you want to take? If you come to the real, so if you dig deep and you start to pull back the layers and realize the ways in which these traumas that you've endured are affecting your reality, do you do nothing and live in your false reality? Because maybe it's comfortable. I mean, a lot of times, why do people who are victims of abuse tend to stay? You know, that whole battered spouse thing. Why do battered spouses stay? Well, because you get into a rhythm of comfortability, even with uncomfortable things. So if you start to dig through and discover these traumas and figure out how they're affecting you, how you interact with reality, how your reality is shaped, do you do nothing and just go with it because at least it's something you know, or do you do something at the very risk of shattering your own comfort? Because change is not easy, people. Change is incredibly difficult. Every big monumental shift in my life has been uncomfortable, has been very, very uncomfortable. I mean, you go back to the episode I had with Jeremy Todd, and we talk a lot about learning to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. We talk about it. I talked about it in my episode with Brandon Hanley, you know, because he and I both train in jujitsu. It's not easy when you identify something that needs to be changed, especially if it's a case here where we're unpacking our traumas and discovering how it's affecting our life now, how it's affecting our reality. Generally speaking, to address these things, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, and yeah, you're going to get uncomfortable. It's a lot easier to stick your head in the sand and ignore these things. So I really want you to just think in your own time. I want you to think about some of these traumas that you've endured, and I want you to try to figure out how they're affecting how you interact with the world, specifically focusing on the negative ways that it's impacting you. And then I want you to think, do you just want to continue, you know, keep on keeping on, just deal with it, or do you want to do the hard thing and take action to maybe dispel it just like Wanda did, or take action at the risk of shattering your own comfort, because it's going to be uncomfortable. But as you deal with these things, you'll get comfortable again at some point. So that's all I really wanted to talk about here. I told you guys it wasn't going to be a very long episode, but I just think these are really important things to think about. And I think it kind of ties up these last several episodes together in a nice little bow. So we can all kind of think about the shit that we've endured in our lives, the manipulations, think about how, think about the victim blaming, think about how you've been victim shamed, think about how you victim shamed others, think about how past traumas, past things have shaped our world into what we're living now. And then kind of think to yourself, do I want to continue to live in this cycle, or do I want to try to break the cycle? So, how you go about it is, of course, completely up to you. I will say, if you've not explored therapy, I strongly encourage you to do so. It is incredibly helpful when you have the right therapist. So if, maybe it's just you need a friend, maybe you just need to do some meditation, maybe self-reflection, whatever it is that helps for you, maybe you need to create something. I really just hope that these last several episodes have really kind of got you thinking about some of the ways that your past has created who you are. And then, of course, always try to find ways to better yourself. So, this kind of concludes this little trilogy, this unofficial trilogy. Really excited. So that the next 10 episodes are going to be a 10-part series. I'm officially declaring it now, and I'm going to make some posts on Facebook this week and kind of list out the upcoming episode characters that I'm going to be focusing on. So the next 10 episodes, I haven't, I guess, figured out what the series is going to be called, but I will be focusing on heroes and villains, and I will be focusing on the flip side of each. So moving forward, starting next Monday, and then alternating for the next 10 weeks, I will start with a villain, then I will go a hero, and then a villain and a hero and a villain and a hero, and so on and so forth for 10 weeks. And we are going to explore the flip side of each character. We're going to discuss, for our heroes, we're going to discuss the ways in which maybe they're not heroic at all. Maybe we have misunderstood or misconstrued their actions to provide them with nobility that maybe doesn't exist. We're basically going to explore the dark side of these heroes. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we're going to talk about bastions of evil, and we're going to analyze them, and we're going to point out ways in which perhaps they're not these evil people that we have come to despise and hate. I'm seriously looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fantastic. Like I said, I'll go ahead and put together a post on Facebook, letting you all know the characters that are going to be explored. And, obviously, I'd love to get some discussions going. If you haven't visited the Facebook page, please go over there, give it a like and follow. Keep in mind, there are video episodes for all of these. If you haven't had a chance, please go over to the YouTube page, hit a subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Then, of course, you can find me on all of the major places where podcasts are listed. I did reach back out to Pandora because it's the only directory in which I'm not listed. Apparently, they are super bogged down, but they said they're going to escalate my case since it's been like 3 months and I still am not on there. So, as always, everybody, I'm Tony B, and you all be safe out there.